Okay, now let's give a close reading to this poem. Dem tell me, what dem want to tell me. We get that repetition right away to create a rhythm. These people, dem, who are they? Is it school? Culture? We don't know. But they tell me what they want to tell me. They bandage up me eye, blind me, cover with me own history, bind me to my, blind me, I always see bind there, I misread that, bind me to me own identity. They use his stories almost against him. What kind of stories? Well, they tell him about 1066 and all that. There was a very famous kind of satirical history book called 1066 and all that. 1066 is the Norman invasion of Britain. It's a very established part of British history. They tell the speaker about that. They tell him about the panto characters, Dick Whittington and his cat. But when it comes to historical figures like Toussaint Louverture, they don't tell him anything about that. Here we get also, we should note that the poem is, even though it has repetition, it is written in a free verse, and there's a kind of openness to the way it's written, and also it's turning anger about something into humor. And we see that really here. Who is Toussaint Louverture? Well, I want to tell you a lot about him, and I really recommend C.L.R. James's magnificent book, The Black Jacobins. But actually, we don't need to go read The Black Jacobins, and that's not what poetry's about. Poetry's about the experience it's giving you right in this moment. Well, guess what? The poet, Agard's going to tell you about Toussaint Louverture, and the most important thing here really isn't about the historical details about Toussaint, but the sounds that we get from Toussaint. We get an intented stanza. It's in italics. And what we learn is Toussaint, a slave with vision, lick back Napoleon. I love that line so much. I think lick back is slang, and it's beat back. But it doesn't matter. It's that CK sound that just sounds amazing. It's that verbal energy that comes out in music, in rap music in particular, where consonants and vowels themselves carry meaning. So you lick back Napoleon, battalion, even there's a kind of rhyme. Is it half? And first black. We get that again. Republic born. Toussaint de Torn. To the French, Toussaint the beacon of the Haitian Revolution. Born thorn, Toussaint was a thorn to the French. But to the Haitians, he was a beacon. So actually, the poet's given you a lot of information. And you know what? If you were serious and this poem touched you and you took it seriously, you'd look these things up because you'd want to know your history if this is part of who you are. Now, I wonder, it really begs the question, who and what makes your history? Toussaint was Haitian. I mean, the speaker of this poem seems to be talking about Britain a lot. Where does our identity lie? Is it just because we're black, or for me, I'm Indian or Canadian? That's my connection, or could Toussaint actually be a part of my own history? I think that's kind of the bigger ideas that the poem takes on board, but really doesn't detail. I think it leaves that to you. If you're interested, if you feel these people are important, then I think you should go look them up. Now look, they're going to tell me about the guy who discovered the balloon. Oh, here's a very funny, and a cow who jumped over the moon. There you get nursery rhymes, right? And here we get science. And this is all the stuff we're learning in school. And the dish with the spoon. I mean, this is very funny, I think. The stuff we learn in school. But you know what they never tell me about this woman, Nanny de Maroon. Now again, we get this repetition of what they don't tell me about. What they don't tell me about. Here we get now a new character. Nanny, Seafar Woman. What a wonderful phrase. Seafar, is she a future fortune teller? Is she someone who can see into the future? Or is she just someone with really great eyesight, so can see far away? Of mountain dream, fire woman struggle, hopeful stream to freedom river. Here we get this metaphor of her, as if this woman was herself a river. We move to the third kind of reprise. Then tell me about Lord Nelson and Waterloo. Again, we get another battle history. But they don't tell me about the Zulus. There are other people, there are other great warriors, seemingly. And they do tell me about Columbus and another date. Battles, dates. Mr. Gove's renovations to the history curriculum come to mind. If history is just a series of dates and famous people and battles, well, there's a lot of people whose experiences get shoved out. And I think that's something this poem's talking about too. Because what happens to the Caribs and the Arawaks? Natives, indigenous people to these areas that were colonized or quote-unquote discovered by Columbus, they were slaughtered. They were enslaved. They were exploited. And their perspective isn't really taken into consideration. I mean, history, modern historiography really questions like who's telling the story and from what perspective. And again, these are the larger themes and ideas this poem is really dealing with. Then tell me about Florence Nightingale and She Lamp and how Robin Hood used to camp. Then tell me about Old King Cole was a merry old soul. And never tell me about Mary Seacole. So here we get mythology of the British. We get more songs. We get history of a nurse, a hero. But you know who we don't hear about? Another nurse, Mary Seacole. Now, Mary Seacole might be someone who should be. If you don't know who Florence Nightingale is, I wonder if that name itself is something that rings in your memory. I didn't really know who she was, but I grew up knowing that name, even in Canada. But Mary Seacole is someone I learned about only in my 20s, actually. And again, I invite you to go learn about her, because it's not for me to tell you. But the poet themselves wants to tell you something about Mary Seacole, but in a poetry way, not in the historian's way. Mary Seacole from Jamaica. She traveled far to the Crimean War. She volunteered to go, and even when the British said no, she still braved the Russian snow. You know what she was? She was a healing star. That's a metaphor again. She wasn't like a healing star, guys. She was a healing star among the wounded. She was a yellow sunrise to the dying. Here we get this image of light. These people provide something bright. If you remember previously, Toussaint was a beacon. And the speaker complained about bandaging of his eyes and his blinding. Well, these people are providing him with some kind of light. And here we get back this reprise. Dem tell me, what dem want to tell me. But now, something new's happening. I checking out my own history. I carving out me identity. That word carving really sits in me. That's the image. That word sounds really powerful to me, but also there's this image that history is this one enormous block, and that through discovering his own story, Agard is carving into that block a new type of version of himself. And I think he's inviting the reader to think about that too. I think there are a lot of political poems out there, and I think there are a lot of poems that are angry that do a lot better job than this poem. But when I spent a little bit of time with it, there's a lot going on here that seems engaging, and that seems funny, and that seems hopeful and positive. And these things, I think, are things to be celebrated in this poem.